In today's video we will discuss the top 10 scariest video games of all time. You don't want to miss these top 10 scariest video games of all time. Please make sure you subscribe to the Top 10 Jaw-Dropping Facts channel. New videos release every Monday through Friday. Number 10. Slender. This is a first-person horror game that gained worldwide success and praise in 2012 and is based on the folklore of Slender Man, who is normally depicted as a tall man with a white face and no facial features who wears a suit. He is known in the legends for abducting countless children in dark, mysterious settings like deep forests and abandoned buildings. The game is set in the middle of the night in a dense forest and is extremely unsettling because you know Slender Man is around, but by the time you see him it is usually too late. It is also very hard to see in the game and you need to use a flashlight, which will eventually die if left on for too long, so be careful with its use. Number 9. Condemned: Criminal Origins. When the Xbox 360 launched in late 2005, it was lacking in terms of memorable software, but gamers found a gem among that early game library in the form of Condemned: Criminal Origins, a first-person horror game by Monolith Productions. Unlike a lot of other first-person games at the time, guns did not feature prominently in its gameplay. Instead, the game placed a significant emphasis on melee combat. As players explored the decrepit setting, in control of an FBI crime scene investigator framed for murder, various melee weapons like axes, pipes and 2x4s could be picked up and used in combat. Every enemy encounter took on an intense personal experience, as players had to brutally take down enemies up close. Condemned was a sales hit, and its melee combat innovations can be seen in later games like Left 4 Dead 2 and Dead Island. Number 8. Resident Evil 7. Following Resident Evil 4, the series fell into something of a sophomore slump. The game's budgets exploded, and all the horror elements took a backseat to unending action spectacle. It all culminated in RE6 being chock full of hours of explosions and car chases, just to be met with general apathy by critics and the gaming public. Developer Capcom took it as a sign that things had to change for the series to maintain relevance. With Resident Evil 7, they decided to steer the franchise back to its roots and isolate the player in an abandoned Louisiana mansion with too many Cajun seasoned monsters and not enough bullets. In a new twist, the game is controlled from a first-person view, amplifying the claustrophobia of the Baker Estate's dark hallways. VR support was also added to make the player feel like they're really in a house of horrors. Most of RE7's gameplay elements would then be carried over into Resident Evil Village, released in 2021. Number 7. S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Shadow of Chernobyl. When you think about it, the radioactive wasteland of Chernobyl, Ukraine, is a perfect setting for a scary video game, especially when you add radioactive mutants into the mix. Released for the PC in 2007, S.T.A.L.K.E.R. is a first-person survival game set in an alternate reality where a second nuclear disaster occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant that mutated the area's environment, including plants and animals. Shadow of Chernobyl is primarily recognized for its heavy, bleak atmosphere and open-world design. The real area of Chernobyl is one of the eeriest and most dangerous places on Earth, and designing a video game based around surviving in such an unsettling place is arguably one of the creepiest game concepts ever created. Number 6. Pathologic 2. Pathologic 2 is hard to encapsulate in just a few paragraphs. It's at once a basic survival game, but also a mind-bending tale of plague and poverty in a setting inspired by the dying Russian Empire at the turn of the 20th century. The player is tasked with clearing their name of a wrongful murder while scrounging for food, water and antibiotics to stave off infection. The player character, Artemy Burek, is a doctor. He eventually sets his sights on curing the disease spreading through the game world, but only has 12 days to accomplish it before everything in the region is consumed. Every character around Artemy can succumb to sickness and force dire consequences onto the game's story. At night, he's beset by nightmares that only get more surreal and cryptic as time runs out. Number 5. Silent Hill 2. Along with Resident Evil, the Silent Hill franchise helped define the modern horror game genre back on the original PlayStation. The second title in the series was one of the earliest major releases for the PlayStation 2, receiving rave reviews at the time, and its legacy has only increased with time. Set in the fictional American town of Silent Hill, the game puts an emphasis on psychological horror, where running away from enemies is often a much more viable choice than engaging in combat. The game's strengths also lie in its narrative design, as much of the storyline is derived from objects found in the environment, and from the town itself. Silent Hill 2 is still widely regarded as the best entry in the long-running series and regularly charts high on lists of the best video games of all time. Number 4. Dead Space. The original Dead Space made a huge splash in the games industry when it was released in 2008, and is often credited with helping jumpstart the horror genre comeback of the late 2000s. Set aboard a derelict mining spaceship called the Ishimura, Dead Space puts players in control of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, an engineer who finds himself having to survive a mysterious alien scourge that has infected the ship and wiped out its crew. Dead Space functions like a tribute to Ridley Scott's 1979 sci-fi horror masterpiece Alien, as Isaac is reminiscent of that film's lead character Ripley. Both characters are not soldiers and must rely on their wits and technical know-how to survive. The game also introduced an innovative dismemberment system to its combat, where enemies' limbs had to be shot off in order to take them out. The series lost its way a bit with the more action-oriented Dead Space 3. But the original game and its sequel are absolutely terrifying and help elevate the horror. Number 3. Alien Isolation. Fans of the Aliens franchise were justifiably skeptical when Alien Isolation was revealed in early 2014. After all, just a year earlier, they had received the abysmal Aliens, Colonial Marines, so to say that confidence in the franchise was at an all-time low would be a vast understatement. Isolation developer Creative Assembly, not responsible for Colonial Marines, was evidently keenly aware of this issue because they delivered the best Aliens game to date. Isolation returned the series to its horror roots, functioning as something of a love letter to Ridley Scott's original film, as it retains and builds upon the frightening concepts that film introduced. Unlike Colonial Marines, there is only one alien in the game and players are trapped on board a ship with it. It can't be killed and stalks the player relentlessly, contributing to a stressful, terrifying experience. Number 2. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Being chased by monsters might just be the scariest gameplay experience of all time, especially in the first-person perspective. Being chased happens all the time in Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and if these sequences don't drive you mad with terror, the darkness probably will. Amnesia introduces a sanity mechanic that increases the longer you look at horrifying images and stay in the darkness. The problem is you need to hide from monsters in the dark. This creates an interesting risk and reward to the very act of hiding, as you must throw yourself into risky situations just as often as you need to hide from them. This PC game is definitely not for the faint of heart. Number 1. Outlast. Outlast is honestly so terrifying, it makes Amnesia: The Dark Descent look like a sun-soaked vacation. Players control a journalist who sneaks into a remote psychiatric hospital to investigate reports of horrific events. The hospital is filled with all manner of disturbing imagery and enemies that will chase you down until they kill you. Outlast is further proof that first-person perspective is the most effective for horror games, as you hide under a filthy, blood-stained bed while a mad, skeletal doctor enters the room in pursuit. You'll understand why. Outlast is available for download on PC, PS4, Xbox One and Mac, but download at your own risk. If you manage to get even an hour into Outlast, you are a brave soul indeed. These are the top 10 scariest video games of all time. These games will have you spooked and scared to play your game in the dark. I hope you enjoyed our breakdown of the top 10 scariest video games of all time. Please leave a comment below for any scary games you think we missed. Do not forget to subscribe to the Top 10 Jaw-Dropping Facts channel. And new episodes release every Monday through Friday.